Before we begin, I want to say a very special thank you to everyone who subscribed to this channel. We're now over 750 subscribers and well on our way to 1,000. It means the world to me. We also do have exciting news that we have set up the email submission system, so if you have any scary stories that you would like to see narrated on this channel, please feel free to contact me at thetruekingofcreepy@gmail.com, as shown on the screen. But let's hop into the video. This story is something I'm always a bit hesitant to discuss. What happened to me is something that I carry with me every day of my life. And this story is true, and it really did happen to me. The person narrating this, the King of Creepy. The most frustrating and puzzling thing in all that I'm about to tell you is the unbelievability of it all. We live in a fairly grounded world, and while I do believe that there is more out there that we have not yet discovered, or maybe we can't yet perceive with our limited minds, many a number of my fellow man disagree with this sentiment, believing that we are all that there is. There is no before, no after, just us, what you can see, feel, and test. My experience solidified my belief that those sentiments are not always true. As a bit of background to my story, I'm only 28 years old at the time of recording, and by all intents and purposes, I'm still what you would call a very young man. My current self, however, is much different than the young man from my story. When I was about 18 or 19 years old, I was very angry at the world. I grew up in a fairly loving family, but there were family struggles and certain people that I never exactly had what I'd call a positive relationship with. Getting into it further might be a bit of a mess when it comes to family in case someone were to find this, but it's essentially there was an entire dramatic situation around the marriage of one family member, and this caused a small divide in my family that never truly went away. This divide actually impacted a lot of relationships in my family, and many of them soured very quickly, including some that affected me. This situation often weighed on my personal happiness, and it was one of the many things that occupied my mind as a teenager. I went to a very religious school in my younger years, and my family didn't actually have much money, but my father had experienced some very traumatic things in his childhood at school, and he wanted to make sure mine was not a repeat of his. I suppose that once you've been made to run between lines of your fellow classmates and been smacked, hit upside the head, and paddled with boards, you probably don't exactly want your son to go to a similar school as you experienced that at. Times were different, and I'm sure they'll be different in the future as well. Now, being a young man, I didn't understand the context of my upbringing. I was a very angry person trying to find my place in the world, and I had a hard time believing that there was a purpose to really anything. I also believed that most religion and spirituality was something used to guilt and control others, as that was my experience in school. It was a rod used to encourage obedience, not an actual belief that served any purpose. Couple these beliefs and jaded ideologies with my introverted awkwardness and anxiety disorder and depression, and I was a bit of an aimless mess. In the context of the problems that others go through, I'm sure mine were not severe, but at the time they felt soul-crushing. I was on my way home from college one day, and I remember feeling a general sense of emptiness. I was driving in the car and just feeling lost, aimless, like I had nowhere to go and I was going through the motions. Other than my parents, I started to believe at this point that nobody would really care if I were to just go away. I suppose that's the nice way to say what I'm trying to say. This whole thing happened in the winter, and Minnesota winters are a bit of a mess, and it's a real crapshoot whether or not we're going to see a white Christmas or a brown one, but severe cold and ice are almost always a guarantee. I was coming up to a curve in the road that I always took on my way home, and normally these roads were well treated and the area was very safe. But today, something was different. I'm not sure if the city didn't expect heavy ice or if some happenstance had caused the road to go untreated that day. Maybe someone got sick, there was some oversight, or they just hadn't gotten to it yet. But this curve in the road was not normal. It had not been treated for ice or cold weather conditions at all. I took the turn the same way I always did, a little fast, being a reckless kid, but this time my car didn't turn. Not the way that it should, that is. The original turn completed, but I felt a feeling of emptiness and weightlessness and confusion as my car continued to turn. 30 degrees became 60 degrees, then 90 degrees, then 180 degrees, faster and faster like a spinning top, but it just didn't end. I was on a highway, spinning around, disoriented, but noticing that I had now crossed into oncoming traffic. An electrical pole was coming up on the other side of the road, or should I say, the oncoming side of the road that I now found myself on, in what should have been the grass. I saw the pole, and then I saw the one thing I really didn't want to see on top of that: cars down the road, coming at probably 50 to 60 miles per hour if they were following the speed limit, right for where I was spinning. Now, there was no real way they or I could stop in time. If I didn't hit the pole, they would hit me, and I remember almost laughing in my head thinking, well, this is it. This is how I'm gonna die. What a stupid way to die. A lot of thoughts flashed through my head in a matter of just a few seconds when this all took place. What would happen to my mom and dad? They needed me. What would people remember about me and how I lived? I was very young. Was there a heaven? Was there anything after? I must have said the world's quickest prayer, remembering what I had been taught growing up, and despite not being very spiritual at the time, I still believed that there must be some kind of God, just that he must not care about me. I'm not sure why I said a prayer, but I did, knowing that I was dead and this was the end of whatever story I had been a part of to this point. Then something changed. There was no noise, no booming voice, and no reaction from me. I could not correct my car, and I had already tried, and I was bracing myself for an impact that never came. I was now back on the opposite side of the road, driving just as I should be. No spinning, no sliding, perfectly driving down the road. There was a feeling that happened in the split second before, as if my car had just been moved by something, relocated. I didn't understand in that moment what had happened, and whenever I tell this story, others try to come up with a very logical and grounded justification. It's not exactly logical to tell people that your car was beamed around like the Star Trek Enterprise had just moved it from one side of the road to the other. So many say that I must have blacked out for an instant and mere chance pushed me back onto the road. I must have been so traumatized that some kind of survival instinct kicked in inside me, causing me to know the exact turn, angle, and braking speed that would put my car back on the road perfectly. I've entertained these notions in my head, but none of them could have happened. Now, call me sentimental in my older age compared to when I was a teenager, but I know that neither I nor chance was what put my car back on the road that day. Now, I never want to tell people what to believe in, but this experience personally changed my life. I still have many doubts in life, many complaints, and maybe some unconventional beliefs, but this day reminded me and made me believe that there was some purpose to my existence. Someone or something still wanted me to be on Earth, at least for the time being, even though I didn't personally want to be. Now, like I said, I would never tell other people what to believe, but personally, I believe that God put me back on the road that day. I don't really know why, and I can't ever make anyone else believe what happened to me. And this is probably one of those you had to be there things cranked up to the maximum. I know I've said it a few times, but I'm not a person who wants to make others see things my way when it comes to things like religion or spirituality, or even what comes after death. And in fact, I don't really want to be the arbiter of truth for anyone. There's a lot of reasons people believe what they believe on either side, and a lot of them feel, at least from the perspective of that person, very justified. This day, however, changed a key part of my outlook on life. My depression and anxiety, they never left me, but my feeling that there was no purpose to my life, that I was just one meaningless speck in an uncaring world, that feeling was lessened, lightened in a way. I still feel small, but in a new way. The stories I've encountered, and even the ones I've lived like this one, made me believe that there is a lot more out there beyond us that we just don't understand. There are creatures and beings we cannot fully fathom, and one of them took pity on me that very day.